It seems to be a negative trend. AAA video games are being sold to consumers that are loaded with glitches or just outright incomplete, often requiring a myriad of patches that must be downloaded as soon as the game is popped in for the first time, lest the consumer find a game-breaking glitch and has to wait for the developer to put out a patch to fix the problem. So why is this such an issue? Why are we getting a lot of unfinished games? Does the industry need to change the way it designs and/or tests games? This is our subject on this episode of Downloadable Content. Next. Downloadable Content. I am Brian, and along with me we have Ron.
Hi, everyone.
And back from the long hibernation, we have Wyatt.
Hello, hello.
Wyatt makes his debut here in Season 5.
Not my first time here, but first time for a while, yeah.
Yeah, this is overall your 9th episode.
Oh, that's actually more than I thought.
This is your 9th. You have, I think you need another almost 50 to catch up to Ron here. So,
I'll say 9 episodes. Back in my day.
Back in my day, we have our own resident Cranky Kong. All right.
Back in my day, we were still playing on 360 and PS3, and we liked it.
Yes, and we ate dirt, and we were thankful for that dirt.
Because the dirt was warm, unlike the cold, cold realities of life.
Yes, and especially the cold outside, my God. But weather aside, downloadable content can be found on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher, and you can get in contact with us a variety of ways on Facebook, facebook.com/dlcontent, at Twitter at dlcontent, on Tumblr at dlcpodcast.tumblr.com, and of course through email, dlcontent1@gmail.com, so all the different ways to get downloadable content into your ears. Take that as you will. But yes, on today's episode, we are going to talk about broken games, what I call broken games, and this particular episode was very much largely inspired by an opinion piece that I read on Polygon.com. This piece was written back in November 2014, written by Brian Krause. He was talking about how he thinks that broken video games are the new norm. And he goes on to talk about what developers need to do to fix that. So we're gonna get into the discussion in just a second. I know, Wyatt, you wanted to jump on because you have words to say. I know you are planning to write about this on your own blog over at Sprites and Dice. So.
Yes, I always have words to say. The words I have to say are actually more on the positive side, more of a positive twist on it. I definitely believe in Brian Crescente's words. I remember reading this article a while ago, and this definitely is a trend. But I think while it's kind of on a rapid decline in the industry for AAA games, I feel like for indie games and some of the more thoughtful entrepreneurs out there in the gaming industry, this is actually a positive trend that they've been able to start manipulating for their benefit. So I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yes, we definitely will. But to begin, right off the bat, his opening paragraph, today's cutting edge of game consoles brought with them living worlds, new ways to interact with entertainment and experiences that weave seamlessly with vast social networks. They also created a new norm, selling not a finished game, but the promise of one. And, while I don't, don't play too many AAA titles anymore because I think many of them are crap, and that's just my own personal opinion. I do see a lot of gamers and on message boards and articles like this with comment threads talking about how you have these big, huge, hyped up AAA titles, and then right off the bat, they need these patches as soon as you pop it into the console, or oftentimes gamers will find a lot of glitches, sometimes game-breaking glitches, and it can lead to feeling like you just plunked down $60 or more just to become a glorified beta tester. And it doesn't seem like this was the case. This is a new thing. It seems as if AAA developers, at the very least, are getting a little bit more slipshod in how they go about developing and testing games. So, why are we now finding games that are so loaded with errors now? Why aren't they taking the time to make sure all the glitches and everything are addressed?
This is my opinion, but I think it comes down to a simple fact of money, in that the publisher wants to make their money back now, and they don't want to wait for the developer to fix all the bugs. And once it gets quote-unquote good enough, they're just going to slap a release date on it. Then if they don't have all the bugs, or the majority of the game-breaking bugs fixed by that release date, well, then we're just going to ship it anyway and just have to patch it on release day.
So you think it's general impatience?
Yeah, because
on the part of the publisher.
Yeah, on the part of the publisher, because they invested in some games hundreds of millions of dollars, and they want a return on investment to show for their bottom line.
But what would be the problem? I mean, yes, you mentioned impatience, but I mean, then that leads to a potentially faulty product, which means you have an angry customer base. You'd think that you would want to have a longer development time, make sure all of the issues are ironed out before, potentially releasing this game on, a public that can be very fickle and very vocal.
Time is finite. People that don't want to wait around multiple years for a particular release of the game unless you have a very devoted fan base. Like Mass Effect 3, like when we finished up Mass Effect 3, we thought that they were going to be done with it, and then only come with this year's E3 that we found out they're going to make a Mass Effect 4 of some kind. And we're like, okay, well, that's cool, but after how 3 ended up, we want you guys to make it be as good as it can be, both gameplay-wise and story-wise. And that, and they also want to avoid the issue of having a bunch of games being released in the holiday window.
I think that, there's a few reasons why things are moving this way. One of them is definitely what Ron just brought up, which is, time and publishers. But there's also this effect of there's this burgeoning effect of technology, where, let's face it, games now, rather than 10 or 20 years ago, or even just, let's go back to 10 years ago, when downloadable content was, I think downloadable content was starting to hit the scene around 2003 or 2004. It was definitely the exception to the rule, but that's when downloadable content started becoming a possibility, where you didn't have to just have an expansion, but you could just send small, details over online. We really started to see that 2004, 2005, 2006, and people were nervous about it back then, saying that, this was the way that you could publish an unfinished game, although they were using it in a different context. Games have gotten bigger. Games have gotten a lot bigger. Take a look at a Mario game from, even just the GameCube version, and then look at the processing power of it now. Take the look of a game like Skyrim in comparison to the older ones, where suddenly everything has to be 3D rendered, and there's the worry about the pixelation, and not pixelation, but the way that the grass flows in the wind to make it look as perfect as possible. You're creating not only more open world games, which is great, and you're not only creating more content for those games, you're also trying to make them prettier run better, run smoother, run at better pixelation resolutions. These are all fantastic things. But even as technology continues to grow, that makes the size of the studio have to get bigger to keep it running faster, and it also makes it so there's more chances for bugs to get in there, right? The bigger a game is, the more bugs there has to be. The one example I want to bring up, actually, is from way back in the day. The Elder Scrolls 2 was a Daggerfall game for MS-DOS back in 1996. It was before Morrowind, it was before Oblivion, it was before Skyrim. It was the second game in the series. And it was heralded as being this ridiculously massive game that you could do anything you wanted in, which was fantastic. And the kind of joke of it was that there was so much you could do that they were patching this game for years, because it kind of turned into a labor of love for the few guys that developed it back then. They're like, yeah, we want to keep making it better, but by that point, because there's no downloadable content back then, they would just occasionally release a patch online that you'd have to download on your own and re-put in there. And even a few years later, you could still be walking up a staircase and all of a sudden fall through reality, my friend joked about. But they kept playing the game because it was just so darn big and so awesome. It was almost kind of part of the not part of the allure, but it was almost like part of the charm. Like, look at this massive game, and look at how far they try to go. That's the normal now. So now you have publishers, like you said, Ron, trying to push along a time schedule, especially for a series game. Assassin's Creed comes to mind, the new Halo Master Chief Collection, where they really wanted to push that through on a nostalgia kick for the holidays and stuff like that. And they're forcing these through on a timeline when they're saying, no, these now have to be HD, they have to be bigger, and they need to have more content.
Yeah, and also to the complexity of the games, too. I think you brought up, too, that not just the size of the complexity of, like, AI pathing and if X then Y occurring, trying to all occur simultaneously because everyone wants a fluid game state and not constant loading screens. That also can leads to a bunch of just like your game is literally. I'm trying to think of one that Watch Dogs from last year, like that had some bugs at launch, not nearly as many as some of the other ones that the article mentions, but there were a couple of times there where you would just have like random like bug glitches, or you'd have NPCs just like basically walking off a bridge because that's what their pathing told them to do.
I mean, from the article, the writer definitely was giving more, saying that this was a problem that was much more prevalent in open world games.
Yes.
And I can see that because, again, you brought up Skyrim, and I don't play very many open world games. I think for me personally, Skyrim is probably the biggest, most open worldiest game I've ever played. And I've run into a few glitches. I mean, none that were game breaking, but I've run into a couple of glitches that were quest breaking, that you could not complete.
Yes.
You could not complete the quest because the NPC, just wouldn't do what you were supposed to do.
Right. And if I remember correctly, you got the game a few years after it was released.
Not a few years, a few months.
Okay.
I got the game.
Remember...
It was in the same year. I just waited until after the honeymoon phase had passed, when my when my friends on my Facebook actually started to re-emerge from the Skyrim coma.
Can't talk now. Skyrim.
Basically,
that's all I heard.
Relationships ruined, people flunking out of college, all for Skyrim. And then I waited until after the orgasm wore off before I bought it.
So there's this weird it's not a double standard. There's this weird double-edged sword that's happening with games right now, where you have them where there's more stuff, there's more shiny, there's greater things that are happening in games, not just on the AAA titles, but again, we'll get to the other part, which is indie games that are trying to open world stuff for more open-ended content, and there's more ability for us to explore and just appreciate a game, not so much in the aspect of let's get from point A to point B and finish the story, but also just to look around and have a good time and try our own things and get involved in massive multiplayer and The positive of unfinished games, even for AAA titles, is when they do something like the downloadable content season packs. So this is really great for, let's see, what's the last one that I did this for? Halo 4. I got it for nostalgia reasons because Halo 1 was, I have such fond memories of it. And I got it, and I got the season pass, and it was great because every month or two, I would suddenly be like, ding, hey, look, there's more stuff available, and I'd have 3 or 4 more maps appearing, as well as another type of game style. And it would just be right there, and it would be something new content that I could jump into and try a whole nother set of challenges. New achievements unlocked, and it's great that they were able to keep doing this to keep the game reinvigorated. But again, one of the problems is, with anything, the more stuff you add to something, the more complexity, the more chance for something for there to be wrong. I think one of the major issues is that with AAA games, when now there's such an indie-based movement, and there's a ability for us to log on to Steam or even Xbox Live or any of those sort of channels and go, hey, look, I can buy 3 games for $30 or $40, and I'll get my content's worth. When you plunk down $50 or $60 for a single game at release, you want that to be perfect.
And when you're paying that much, you want it to be perfect. You're expecting a complete experience. You're paying for that, and you are entitled to that. That's what you should be expecting as a gamer. So when you have these AAA developers putting out games that are essentially broken, then you're going to have a very angry and very vocal fan base. So what would be the solution? I mean, yes, you have publisher pressures because, as Ron mentioned, publishers are more impatient. They want their money back now. But, how do you solve something like that? Do you have a bigger QA team, or what? I mean, you have beta testing, but how do you catch all of the possible game-breaking glitches when you have a publisher breathing down your neck?
Well, a larger QA department does help, but even then they can only catch so many bugs because they're focusing on like one particular section of a game or one particular aspect of the game, and they're not seeing the game play out as a whole, so they can't go through and be looking for bugs the entire time. Beta testing it, in a sense, also helps because for certain genres, like mainly your MMOs, beta testing your game means you also do stress testing on your servers to see if they can handle server loads and multiple connections going in and out and things like that. Also helps you handle queue times if need be, or even determine if you need to add more servers before the game actually launches. Generally speaking, I think the only way you can stop these bugs getting these game-breaking bugs to play out in the first place is you may just need to have invite in a small portion of the gaming population, like maybe some sort of raffle, be like, for fans of the game or genre, enter this raffle and you can get an all-expenses paid trip to the developer and play the game first. And by play the game, I mean literally they hand you a disc and say, here, put this into... Or they hand you a disc and a specially modified console to let you play it early and go, hey, here's the game, play it, and then if you find any bugs, just report back to us about them.
Well, that's kind of what the writer here at this article is saying. He offers a possible solution, and I'm quoting from the article again, is, while all major publishers have armies of testers working through their games before they go live, it's impossible or impractical to thoroughly test a bottled-up living world. The only way that can be done is by releasing portions of the game for free for a limited time and packing that gameplay with as many people as possible.
Right.
But so, he goes on to say that, that sort of beta is considered a bit of a one-off, but if publishers want to stay in the living world building business, they're going to need to make that the norm.
Right. So like here's where things get interesting, right? Because let me harken back to my World of Warcraft days for a moment, where there's something called the public test realm, where before they release a new beta, or no, when they kind of are about to release a new patch, they'll actually create something called a test realm, where people that are really gung ho about the game and want to try out the new balance of something for like their player versus player or their player versus environment game setup, they can go in there, try out their new build and say, hey, look, so I did my attack with my hunter for all of these different poison damage, and I saw that it wasn't stacking correctly. They know the lingo. They're invested in the game as the owners, as the developers, and they're able to kind of help out. It's sort of this joint beta that was able to happen. The beta sort of happened with Titanfall. I know that Titanfall opened up a beta that you were able to get through GameStop from pre-ordering or some other ways as well, Luck Online. And when you were part of these betas, it went on for about 2 or 3 weeks, I believe. And during that time period, they were able to bang out a whole bunch of ideas. They got as many people playing at once, and they said, okay, we're shutting down the servers. We're going to keep working on this for a while. And then a few weeks later, they were able to release the game because now they had that information. As soon as the game was installed, there was a patch that was already there waiting for them when they connected online to make sure that all those bugs were patched out. So there is a way to do it. I definitely agree with the writer here in this fashion.
And the people who end up testing the game get something for free out of it, which I think is a wonderful idea, because at the current rate that most AAA developers are going about this, it's going to be a matter of time before gamers as a whole get sick and tired of being what is essentially glorified beta testers. They pay all this money for a game, they want it to work, and eventually they're going to catch on, and they're going to be like, oh, this game is being made by such and pick a developer. Oh, but
Ubisoft.
Ubisoft's already been kind of chastised and shut down in comment forums for this. I hate to say. I love some of Ubisoft's worlds, but yeah, whenever you see their name come up, you'll see people go, I can't wait for this game, but I'm not going to buy it for like the first year. I've seen that comment a few times.
Yeah, Ron, you were very, very quick with that. Makes me think you've been burned by them before. A little personal experience.
Well, I personally haven't. However, my brother, he enjoys the Assassin's Creed games. And not with Unity, not with the French game, which obviously had the most bugs. But I know with Assassin's Creed 3 and Black Flag, there were some rather large bugs with the game where he would have a pretty major graphical glitch during a cutscene, or he would have something bug out on him during middle of gameplay. And it wasn't usually. I say game breaking, but it's more so it's not so much game breaking as much as it is like breaking your immersion in the game, because you're going through, you're trying to enjoy yourself and immerse yourself in the story, and all of a sudden you see some guy walking by and he doesn't have hair, and you just see like this empty back and seeing the mesh of his face. And you're like, oh, I don't think that's supposed to happen.
Oops.
Yeah, that one picture from Assassin's Creed Unity with the lady talking, and all you see are the lips and like the distortion of the back of the head, and there's just
you see her lips, her eyes, and the distortion of like her head.
And you're just watching this, and you're like, when did this turn into a Lovecraft? Like, when did this become Eternal Darkness? Oh dear God, why? You just start screaming.
I didn't know we were doing animatronics from the 80s.
Yeah, you're looking at this game like, wait a minute, I don't recall Big Head Mode being in this game. I mean, wait a minute. That ain't supposed to happen. No, the developer / publisher that I immediately thought of was the one that everyone loves to rag on, and that's EA. But
well, yeah,
EA is way too easy of a target.
Yeah, EA is big. EA is honestly, EA is probably too big for its own good.
EA is kind of one of those classic one of those classic video game publishers now that was big enough. They're like, okay, we'll give you the money. We have the money, but now there's a timetable. We will hype the heck out of your game, but if there's a timetable and you have to stick by it, and they push and push and push. They have actually gotten a little bit better recently because they've been staying a little bit more out of that limelight, and Ubisoft has kind of become one of the bigger targets because of things like Watch Dogs, where we were promised the moon, and there was a great premise to behind that game, but then, a year in, and then I remember seeing it the first PAX and going, wow, this can be phenomenal. Saw it the next PAX. Okay, when's it actually going to come out? I thought it was going to come out 5 months ago. And then everyone gets a little bit more suspicious. And then the Assassin's Creed stuff recently, where the publishers are shooting themselves in the foot because they're promising the moon. They're the ones that are still in the old model of video game creation, so they're expected to have a timetable, and they force themselves to have a timetable because they're trying to hit certain holiday seasons or certain metrics and certain large company things. And I think it's doing more damage than it is good, because now you have too much content, too much stuff that should be great, but now you're trying to stuff it into the same time constraints that you did have a few years ago, even more. Now with a game like Call of Duty, or a game where you're expecting a yearly release.
Excuse me. But, with yearly games, though, with games like Call of Duty, you would think that, there's not much that gets improved upon, so you'd think that the bugs would be minimal. But each game tries to be bigger and better than the one before it, and therein you get some problems.
Right. There's also issues, too, with multiplayer and networking, and you want to provide similar yet different gameplay every year. And, you're going to run out of ideas eventually, but, and they're just trying to milk it for what they can right now before they do run out of ideas. Just now they have Battlefield Hardline is the one that they're doing right now, or they're about to release, where you're basically playing, you're literally playing cops and robbers. You are playing cops and robbers, only the cops are SWAT teams, and the robbers are trying to pull off, blow up the bank and drag the safe along with them levels of robbery.
Right. The one that comes to mind for me, again, is Halo. Because Halo, they just came out with the Master Chief Collection, and I was pumped for that, because that was going to be an HD version of all of the older games. And Brian, you know me. It's not so much that I'm a sucker for Halo. It was just that was a game that I fell into love with first-person shooters and LAN parties and playing co-op with friends. So I love that. And I had this great idea of picking up that game, being able to play through the entire old set of games with a good friend like yourself or Ben or a few other friends, and just sitting down with a few controllers and just booking through. And then I saw the reviews where literally multiplayer didn't work. It just didn't work. And this is a game series this is for a set of games that has already come out. You're just HD improving it and adding some extra upgrades. But because it was kind of a pushed out holiday release, the multiplayer didn't work. And that was a little bit too much. A few glitches in an open world game like Skyrim, I kind of laugh at, because again, I think it's like a symptom of that sort of game. I'm not saying that it's a good thing. It's sort of like when you play a massively multiplayer game for the first time, you expect there to be some issues. It's the first time you just suddenly had several thousand people jump into a game. It's going to happen. But when you're having a game as tried and true as Halo, and that was the bread and butter of it, and it just flops like that really hurt. I'm having a hard time. I still want to pick it up to play in some ways, but I've been refusing to. I've been pushed more and more towards indie games who I feel are doing this kind of open development or unfinished games correctly.
I think it was something in the last episode when we were ranting about the things that developers do that piss us off and they keep doing. We very briefly touched upon this topic because I didn't want to devote an hour to that. So, Shanna brought up the point that now it's the case because of, I guess, the notoriety that, or however accurate it is, that every AAA game has issues with it right out of the gate. She says, I wait. I wait, several months, or up to a year before you pick up the game. Let everybody else break it before they finally, fix the game. It's like she doesn't buy brand new games at launch anymore because she doesn't want to deal with the issues. And I don't blame her. It's the same reason why I don't buy new consoles at launch.
Right, I don't do the same thing either with consoles.
So, the solution that the writer mentioned in the Polygon article, I think, is a definite starting point. I think more developers need to be cognizant. I also think more developers should probably, give their publishers a bit of a stiff arm. Because here's the thing, if the developer releases a crappy product, it's not going to be the publisher that hears it, it's going to be the developer. Right. And the developer is going to go, but the public... No, you made the game. Now, this is your bathwater.
This is your fault. Sleep. This is your pile of poo. Sit in it or clean it up yourself, you piece of garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's where, again, publishers are able to, throw around money, and gamers are very unforgiving about some really stupid
We
things.
are a very fickle and vocal bunch at times, sometimes ridiculously so. Mass Effect 3 ending. Anyway, but, that's the way of it. I mean, it's unfortunate because sometimes the AAA titles can be really, really good, but if they come out of the gate and stumble with, game-breaking bugs and glitches, that immediately drops, the value of the game. And word of mouth, especially with social media, people can very easily, don't pick up this game, it doesn't work. Don't spend your money. And, that can lead to a horrible reputation. And you don't want that. Especially not for games that have been in the development cycle for years.
Right. Now, I don't want to cut you off, Ron, because in a moment I do want to go over to what I think might be a positive spin on this, kind of going away from the AAA games, so...
Oh, I was just going to mention briefly that, not just AAA games are affected by this. I know some indie games have some issues too, but with indie games, because of the relatively small size of the company and making the game, that sometimes these are just bugs. They try their best to fix or catch early, but sometimes they don't. But usually when one is identified, they kind of immediately go, "Oops, that's our bad," and then they figure out. This is also a case where sometimes the gaming community is a nice thing because they can figure out a way to replicate the mistake, and then once the developers see how the mistake occurs, that the bug occurs, then they can figure out a way to fix it and patch it relatively easily. And because indie games are relatively small in terms of hard drive space they take up and things like that, the patch itself would not be a very big one to implement. It would take only maybe 5-10 minutes to download compared to Assassin's Creed Unity having an extra 2 gig install, or Far Cry 4 where you had to sometimes uninstall the game and then reinstall it.
Right, so here's where... Sorry, 1 second.
No dying.
Sorry about that.
No, don't die!
No, don't die! Alright, so we can do a quick pause here?
Yep, that's what I was planning on doing, because we're starting to go with the indie game stuff, and I think that's a good meaty topic to discuss, so we're going to save that for the second half.
Sure.
So, You will get your words in, I promise you. But in the meantime...
I didn't want to just force it, so...
Yeah. We'll get your words in, but in the meantime, everyone's going to have some music. Wyatt will probably listen to dubstep or something in the intermission because that's how his brain works. His brain is
It's all about that bass.
It's a constant rave inside his head. All I can think of is "The System Is Down" from Homestar Runner, but now I'm possibly severely dating myself. But that's all right. But yes, everybody, you'll have some music, and when we get back, we will continue this discussion about broken video games. You're listening to Downloadable Content. We'll be back. Welcome back to Downloadable Content, talking about broken video games. We are still here. Ron and Wyatt have not left. They have not glitched themselves out of the episode. We do not need to download any patches to bring them back.
Patch version 1.4.1.
Yeah, it's like, you're listening to Download...
Ron is still a part of the cast,
yes.
As much as you guys may not want him to.
Yes, you're downloading DLC, it's patch 5.0.1364, or however they come up with those damn decimal numbers.
Now I'm just thinking of Quarter Digital on YouTube did a little skit called The Glitch, which they just put a whole bunch of video game characters like in real life walking around, and one of them touches like a sword that's broken through the ground. They managed to special effects that in, and like Mario and Link tell the person, like, "No, don't touch it." They touch it, and all of a sudden, just the glitch starts destroying everything. It's a hilarious skit. You should look it up if you get the chance.
You know, I just had a thought. If Downloadable Content was actually a live show on like Twitch or something, I'd probably be putting up an image right now of the kill screen on like Pac-Man or Space Invaders.
Yeah,
but. No, this is not a live show, alas. This is all pre-recorded. We're all pre-recorded. But yes, we're going to shift our discussion. We started to, at the end of the first half, to talk about development on the indie level. So now we're shifting away from the AAA developer/publisher dynamic. Indie games don't seem to have that much. They don't seem to have major problems with development like their AAA counterparts. It does happen, but when it does, it doesn't seem quite so egregious somehow. And I know, Wyatt, you were starting to lead into that. I know that is where you wanted to go, so I will yield to you, and we'll go from there.
Well, before I really, because when I get going, I'm not going to be able to stop, because this has been in my head for a while, because I'm starting to write a lot of articles or editorials on that for my website. So, when I say the word early access, what's the first thing that comes to your guys' mind?
I am playing the game multiple months before it comes out. Probably at least 6 months. I am expecting the game to not be complete. I'm expecting to be limited in scope of the game. Generally speaking, probably only the first, 10 to 20 levels or some small area of the game or the starting zone reflecting MMO. I am also expecting there to be a fair number of bugs and the servers to come up and down often.
To me, I hear early access, and I immediately think, beta tester.
Right, which both are kind of accurate. And this is actually something that's really starting to become the next big issue. It's kind of like a segue into broken games. So when you said broken games, originally when you said that you were doing this this podcast, that's actually where my mind went, because I've been really kind of jumping into the indie early access scene more than the AAA games. I mean, I see all the articles about the AAA games failing in this regard, but what's really interesting about early access is because you have these people coming up to you and saying, this game isn't finished yet. It's very obvious. They come, money on the table, and they slide it over, and they go, I have, or they take the briefcase and they slide it over the table at you, go, you can buy this. It's only half of what you want. We'll give you the other half later. Do you want to pay for it now? And I find that really interesting, just conceptually. It feels very much more like a contract, and it feels much more like a really interesting way where in this new gamer community or this new gaming industry, it allows for players to become more invested in their games in a good way. It can be bad too, and I'll get to some of that later, but I feel like there's some real positives there. First off is that first thing I mentioned, which is that when someone says very obviously early access, there's nothing about it saying this is a completed game. You're not being lied to up front. Does that make any sense?
It sort of does. I mean, it's, to me, and this is a personal thing, as soon as the player has to pay money for an early access game, my brain goes, nope, not paying for an incomplete game.
For me, I think the only... I'm sure you can correct me on this. I think the only early access games I've bought into are Starbound, which I kind of regret, and Crypt of the Necrodancer, which I don't think I do regret.
That is a fantastic game.
Yeah. Brian, I don't know if you've played it or not.
I have certainly seen it. I saw it at PAX. That was one of the indie games du jour at last year's PAX.
I bought it during the winter Steam sale. And I was like, well, it's $8, and from my understanding, it's a rhythm dungeon crawl, so that already sort of piques my interest, and it's definitely worth in my opinion, it is definitely worth the money I spent on it. And this also means that I get to, for Wyatt's point, is that because I paid for it early, any future updates or added zones I get for free, basically. And considering the game is still kind of, sorta, halfway complete, I'm hoping, expecting to at least see one, if not two more zones added before the game is officially launched.
Right. So, like, there's some really good positives, and there are some early access games. It's actually more on the rare side, but where they say if you buy this early, this actually happens more on Kickstarter than early access. But we won't get into that differentiation. But if they say, hey, buy this now, and we will give you either a discount when the full game comes out, or we're going to give you the first expansion or the first downloadable content for free as part of it.
Yeah, I know, like you mentioned Kickstarter, like generally speaking, I think it's for most like Kickstarter things, like up to a certain point, you either get a discount or you'll get some sort of like swag related to the game, and then once you go above a certain threshold, you get the game along with the swag, and then if you eventually invest enough money into it, you'll get like credit, like you'll get your name in the credits as a major investor, or like you can suggest an item and they'll try to code it into the game for you.
Yeah, there's actually a really good example of that. The game that was started on Kickstarter and started because of early access, the Shadowrun Returns, where they took the old '80s, the very old version of the game, and they brought it back and they remade it. Harebrained Games. They just put forward about 15 days ago now. They put up, they're like, hey, we want to do a third Kickstarter for Shadowrun Hong Kong. They have the money now to obviously make this, but they're saying, hey, look, we can make this game better and invest more production time if you guys help us out with this. And if you just purchase the game, like the original $15 Kickstarter, they're saying, oh yeah, the soundtrack free. They're already including a lot of that stuff right up front, including unfortunately my screen's not loading, of course, but yeah, you automatically get the digital copy as soon as it comes out. You get all the soundtracks for all the different games, desktop wallpaper for $15. So like Kickstarters have actually evolved where you're getting a lot of stuff up front because they know that you're doing that. Early access on like Steam, not as much, but there is that aspect of it, and that's cool. But what I really want to get into is the developers, and not only are saying early access, come join the game, but the ones that are saying early access, come join the game. I want you to help me create this, and you can put your own spin on it. You can help create the game with us, and I think that's really cool.
You can make a suggestion for it. You make a suggestion for it, or like an idea for it. I know that for Path of Exile, they have a similar thing where with their I don't know if they do it anymore, but I know like if you invested a certain amount of money into the game, that you could make your own item in the game, and like they try to balance it out, and you could try to have this unique item in the game that like you made basically.
And you know, that to me sounds all well and good, provided the developer actually plans on finishing the game.
Yeah.
You know, the unfortunate fact, the flip side to that is that, you know, early access can also mean scam, which it's unfortunate. I mean, it was getting to a point where developers would put up these games for early access, you know, put a cost on it, and then take the money and run. And it was becoming enough of an issue for Valve to have to issue a warning on any early access game, basically saying, buyer beware, this game may never ever be finished. So, you know, if you are going to buy this game, you know, you are getting the game in its current state, you know, you assume the risk. You know, and take a look on the Steam store right now. There's a game called The Stomping Land. And the developers are charging $25 as an early access game, and take a look at all the negative reviews, because apparently this game hasn't even been touched in well over a year.
Right. So there are some really negative things that can happen with this, right? There's this sort of educated guess, or educated risk that happens with this, which I find kind of fun and interesting in certain ways. But there's two games that I know that I've regretted buying early access that I can say up front. Or there's one that I've done, and then there's one that I've heard really negative things about. One that I did was something called Craft the World. It looks really interesting. It's sort of like a 2D. You're running a bunch of dwarves. It's a mixture of like 2D Dungeon Keeper meets Minecraft in a way, and it's really, really cool. But the problem is that there's some really big AI pathing issues, and it's taking a while for it to be finished up. And it's it's because he's trying to do so. It doesn't feel finished. I really want to like the game, but just the AI issues and the pathing issues for the individual dwarves has been a little bit too much for me. The one that I know that's really, really bad in terms of it being an unfinished game is Space Base of Nine. It's a game, I believe, done by Double Fine. So people were like, oh, this is going to be a great game. This is going to be fantastic. And it was put forward. It was put onto Steam, early access, and people just jumped onto it because it was one of those things where people felt like they could trust it. They knew that this was going to be well done, and it was building a community in space, and then having to deal with raiders and stuff like that. Again, like Dungeon Keeper, but 3D, more advanced. And then the game just dropped. They stopped updating it a while ago, and it was not finished. It's a half-finished game, and there's been no word. There's been dead silence on it, and it's really ticked off a lot of people. So there is definitely a risk involved. I'm not going to lie about that and say this is a fail-safe way. Part of the cool thing about early access is that it is a bit of a risk, and you're kind of entering into a contract with your developer. So it can be a little more personal, but there are those people that are going to give you the shaft, and that's really frustrating.
So I mean that is why I take the position I do with regard to early access. I mean, especially for gamers who are on a bit of a heavy budget. It's like, okay, you want to plunk down money on games that you know are complete and good quality products. You give a developer $25 for a game that's not finished, and then they just take the money and run. And then it's like, okay, there goes me buying games on Steam or something like that.
Right.
So, again, people who are plunking down money for games to become glorified beta testers, and then the developer, you don't hear a damn thing from them for a year or even longer. I could see where that might, discourage some people from wanting to contribute to a cause that might otherwise be very good. I mean, you introduced me to a game, Night Squad.
Yes.
And I really want that. I really want to buy it. But as long as it still has that early access flag on it, I'm not getting it. As fun as I had when you showed me that game and how silly and great that game was, it's got an early access flag on it. It's not a finished game. It has that early access flag on it. I am not giving anybody a cent until that game is finished. That's just my own personal opinion.
Fair enough. One of the reasons why I trust that one so much, I can, like I said, I totally respect your view. Let me just put that out there. And one reason why I'm kind of leading in with these sort of the more negative things is because I want to get them out of the way before I start just fanboying or fangirling all over some of the really good early access stuff. And
just make sure you clean up after yourself.
I was going to say, don't let me get the bucket.
So, like, Night Squad was great because I found this last PAX, and I know they're going to be at the upcoming PAX, and I cannot wait to see these guys and hang out with them again. And just say hello. Is that I was walking by this booth and everyone just walked away, and it was some guys with nice French Canadian accent, and they hand me an Xbox controller, say, "Want to play?" And I'm like, "Oh, cool! It's got these little cartoony knights everywhere, big screen TV," and then I see that there's 8 controllers. So I go, "Wait, okay, what is this?" I thought it was going to be like a squad based. And they just hand the controllers, and the game's starting to get set up, and they say, "Choose your color." I'm like, "Does it matter?" Like, "No, just choose your color." And then I ask, "Well, what are the buttons?" And he waits until it's starting to load the game, and he goes, "Oh, so you use this button to move, you hit this button to attack, and then you want to get the grail." And that was all the instructions he gave us. And I was like, okay, what? And then that music started, and you just start beating each other up, and it's just ridiculous fun. I was able to see it in person. So one way that I'm able to say I want to see something in early access is when I get to play it at like a convention. So when you get that chance to play it early, no, this is great as it is already. And there's a lot of early access games that when they're already put up for early access, they're already in a very good state. So there's several types. There's the early access of, hey, we are building this from the ground up. We want to make sure that this is being tested the whole way through. You can help us build the game. There's the ones that just want to have more people playing it so they get more feedback. And then there's the ones that are saying, hey, we're releasing this a month or two early. We're just tweaking it. Here's what we want. There's a whole different bevy of different styles of early access. Night Squad is one of those games. It's still in early access. Sadly, I wanted them to finish it. But they're a very small group. And every time they do an update, they're adding a brand new weapon, or they're adding 2 brand new weapons, or they just retooled the entire graphics a few months ago. And it's really cool for me. I actually really enjoy being able to see a game grow. It makes me feel like I've got more of a connection to it, and more connection to the developer. So for me, I really think that's cool.
I'm looking at the Night Squad page on Steam now, and it's... They're still putting out updates. There was one that came out on January 20th. So I mean, they're still working on this game, and that's a very good thing. Because again, I want to buy this game. I'm just waiting for the complete game because it's Bomberman and Gauntlet had a love child. That's what this game is. I don't know,
Throwing obnoxious music, throwing the LAN party fun of just 8 people in the same room.
Because, I played Bomberman when I was a kid. I played Gauntlet when I was a kid. I liked both games, and this game is their love baby. So, come on, guys. And if I run it, I'm going to have to seek this developer down. It's Chainsaw Some Games. And I'm going to have to hunt them down when I go to PAX in March and be like, come on, finish the fucking game already. I want to buy it.
Yeah, the one thing that they're really waiting on is that they want to add co-op, and they're trying to add like a co-op tower of ascension where you're going through towers and they're just adding bosses. So they've got to do a whole bunch of different coding besides that, like very raw, that very close-up multiplayer. So they're really trying to perfect the multiplayer before they get into the co-op. And this is a great way that, again, Chainsaw Some Games is a very small publishing company, and when they came up with this game, they actually went to I wrote about this when I first reviewed the game, or reviewed the early access version of it, that they went to a conference. They're like, okay, you have to create a game in like 48 hours. It was 48, 36, or 72. It was pretty much you had 2 or 3 days to create a game and show us a working demo of it. They won that with Night Squad. They were like, and so like right off the get-go, they were already getting awards for this, saying, hey, look, this is really fun. This harkens back to that Bomberman, that Gauntlet, that ridiculousness. And now we can just keep building on it. That's what they're doing. They want to keep crafting this, and it's really cool that I bought into the game, and I put it down for like 2 or 3 months at a time. And then I have a few friends over for like a party, for a birthday or otherwise, or I have you over, Brian, and we go, do you want to beat each other up for a little bit? Like just 10, 15 minutes? And we just pull open the game, and all of a sudden all of my enthusiasm is right back, and they've got 3 new updates. When I go on the forums, people are commenting right away, hey, look, with the new update, my resolution doesn't work. Or these are my graphics specs, and here's the problem. This is wrong, what you were kind of talking about. That sort of pool of beta testing that can sometimes be done for the AAA games to make it work. And one thing that's really important is that on computers, everybody has a different type of system, right? It's not just like a console. So this sort of group beta testing, where you're kind of releasing it out into the wild and having different people give you feedback, is really, really nifty, because it allows you to do that and then have a much more succinct release, especially if you're a small developer like Chainsaw Some Games, where you don't have to do this giant hype bucket where you're just on television all the time, and you've got advertisements everywhere. You can just say, hey, look, here's our game. It's been here for a while. These people have played it. They like it. Here's the list of reviews. This can backfire, like you said, Brian, where people are sort of put down negative reviews if you're not ready, but that's what separates the good games from the bad games.
Which is very true. I mean, and just full disclosure, I am a beta tester for Kasarth Studios.
Right.
Yeah. So, Tanya is on here on downloadable content pretty regularly, and so I beta tested the 2 games that are currently on Steam now, Chronicles of a Dark Lord episodes 1 and 2. And one of the great things about being a beta tester for a small indie company is, and this was already mentioned earlier in the episode, that issues get reported and then get fixed right on the fly.
Yeah, it feels awesome.
And it's like, okay, Tanya, there's a problem with this because when you do this sprite does that, or or this game causes this game-breaking glitch, and it's a dialogue, sometimes, in real time. Sometimes, I will be, with Tanya, and we are just going back and forth right on the fly. I mean, we have a small little QA group, but, that very quick, and we can try to get all these issues ironed out before the game goes live to the public. And it's great. It's a lot of fun. And now I am playing Episode 2 because I never finished the last beta. So now I'm like, okay, there's a whole bunch of game that I haven't checked out yet. So now it's like, all right, here's the full game, and it's very nice to see, the products of knowing that you were just part of a complete project. So I think with a smaller group, you can get away with that more one-on-one, or it's small thing. And also the one thing, a very important point to bring up, is that a lot of indie games are not bound by a publisher. They don't have a publisher breathing down their neck to recoup the investment immediately.
One of the really cool things that kind of helped make Blizzard famous originally was that Blizzard released games when Blizzard released games. They did not put down a release date. They would just say, "Oh yeah, no, we've been working on this for 5 years." Okay, when's it coming out? When it's ready. They wouldn't let they'd gotten to a point where they didn't have to let themselves be bullied by that. And the great thing about indie developers right now, and for smaller studios, where they're crowdfunding or they're using early access to supplement their studios while they continue to make the game and finish it, it allows them to be beholden directly to us rather than the publisher. So there is something a little bit more direct and personal. Even if sometimes you are playing an unfinished game, again, you're entering into this contract willingly. And I think that's one of the major key points I keep wanting to push.
So, I mean, and because a lot of indie studios are very small, we also, as gamers, tend to be a lot more forgiving with a long development time.
Yes.
I mean, take a look at, this, I think one of the best indie developers out there, Supergiant Games, which they've given us Bastion and they've given us Transistor. It's a very small group. Transistor took several years. Now, when we have a AAA developer taking several years to produce a game, we're like, come on, what the hell's the holdup? But for some reason, we are a lot more forgiving for indie studios that take years on a game, which is just an interesting dynamic. Because I think part of the problem with AAA developers also, Ron mentioned right at the start of the episode, publishers want money, but I also think that so do the fans. The fans don't. The fans want the next installment of the game, especially if it's a long-running series, franchise.
Right. So, yeah, there's a lot of different things that are happening here where indie developers are have a little bit more freedom. That can be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. But in a lot of ways, I'm trying to focus on the good here, especially with the early access. One of the huge pushes that I've seen is just so many people so ticked off to see new game on Steam now in early access, and over and over and over and over and over again. And that is a push that is overwhelming fully released games in some ways. So,
have you run out of words?
I just had a brain fart. I apologize. I just got off work and jumped onto this.
Words just stopped coming.
I feel bad. I don't mean to run roughshod over you here.
No, it's okay.
That's okay. Ron talks enough sometimes.
I have a moment.
So there's a push where indie developers have this extra freedom and early access. I think I brought this up a little bit a moment ago. It can be the way that they fund themselves. this is their Kickstarter where they say, hey, look, we're most there, or we're halfway there, or we're 3/4 of the way there. If you jump on now, we'll give you a small discount, or we will give you access to help create part of the game with us, or, you know, your name will be in the credits as a beta tester, but help us out while give us some feedback. And I think that's really cool. It's a way that by doing this, you can help support that industry. I know that right now, when I look at my library, I probably have... I went through right before the last Steam sale and I put so many things on my wish list and then didn't buy them. I think I have 43 games on my wish list right now. More than half of them are early access. Easy. They're on my wish list. And then I know that in my games library, I have a whole bunch of games that are still in early access that I cannot be more happy that I let myself do that. One of the ones I kind of want to bring up is Amplitude Studios. You might have heard me ranting about that recently on my website. John, goodness names, Brian, is that I just released about how downloadable they have downloadable content that they just released for free as a willing thank you to their studios. It's a whole free update with extra content. They're planning to do this every year. They also had something where in their most recent game, their most recent iteration, which was Endless Legend, it was a top-down sort of Civilization 4 science fantasy whole mixture. It was really bizarre and really cool and very animated in their own way. And one thing I really appreciated that they did was that they said, okay, so we're going to have this many factions, but we're not going to tell you this last faction because you're making it. And if you were in early access, they told you, hey, look, send us your ideas and concepts. It was a message that went out to all of us as an update. Do you want to have this sort of faction created? Give us your ideas. Tell us the way that these characters would move. Tell us the way that these characters would act in like some basic lore, and send this to us, and we'll have a contest. At the same time, they also put out a contest for the artwork for that faction. And then the forums exploded. They have their own forum called Games Together, which is sort of their sort of promise as a company to always work with their community and stay always in motion with it, is that, hey, look, we're always taking your suggestions up front. And they were able to create this awesome new group called Cult of the Eternal End. And it was this faction that plays entirely different than every other faction. They only have one city rather than many. They have this really creepy look and style to them, and they were able to incorporate it with the final game seamlessly. You can't tell that it was member generated at all because they incorporated it into this early access slow move. Now, that same game, I wasn't able to play it when it first came out with early access. Why? Because it didn't work on my game system yet. It did not work on my computer. It hadn't been optimized. But that was part of the process. And for me, that stunk for the first few months, but I got over it. And to be able to be part of that and see that all these player recommendations were coming together to create a much more cohesive game that a lot of people now feel really not indebted to, enamored to, because of them having their own signature on it, the community itself having its own suggestions put into the game. I love that.
So here's a question for you then, Wyatt. What would be the advantage of going to early access as opposed to Kickstarter? I mean, both of them, you're trying to seek the same goal. You're trying to secure funding to develop a game.
That's actually a really weird question.
Because with Kickstarter, you're gonna have to wait for the developer. You may have you may get like a newsletter or something from the developer from Kickstarter, but like you won't get like the game itself, or you won't get nearly as much gameplay out of it, whereas you will with early access, because what you're paying for with early access is you are paying for them to see you're paying for the game in its current state, and you're also paying for whatever updates may come down the pipeline, and those updates will happen no matter what, and you're going to see the game grow and evolve. While with Kickstarter games, you're generally speaking going to have to wait till the finished product.
Right. I mean, that's one thing that's kind of interesting with Kickstarter. It's almost a little bit more of asking for money up front. Like, here's the concept, here's the proof of concept. If they're really far along, they'll show you gameplay videos they've already have, but it's still in their hands. And then they're saying, we want the money so we can finish this. Early access is sort of a working contract that we're working on this game right now, and if you buy in, you're able to start playing the game right now. It can be almost identical. A good example of this would be the War Machine Tactics game that just came out it just actually went to full release and still being updated right after that. But it was first a Kickstarter that looked really cool, and if you Kickstarted it, there was some really ridiculously good deals that I'm so ticked I missed. But then, before it came out, they would put onto early access, and it was a good thing they went on early access because it was still unfinished by that point. And I early accessed it because then I got some of the benefits that the people from Kickstarter did. Not as much, but then I was able to start playing that game. So it's sort of like the in-between between Kickstarter and the full release of the game. I was able to go in and do the early access. In terms of to your direct question, Brian, I'm not sure which one is better because it's a very different beast. When you say early access, it's very much something that's kept for just Steam in a lot of ways. And it's very much fueled by how Steam works, which can be a good thing, but also can be a bad thing. Kickstarter gives you a better platform to kind of sell your game, so to speak. When you have an early access game, it's mostly just like the one trailer, the list of things. While on a Kickstarter, there's usually a lot more content they have to show up front. So I don't actually really have a full answer for that because they can kind of be interchangeable. But early access does give you a better ability to kind of just jump, and be like, I want to see gameplay, I want to see it. And what I really like about early access is actually what we brought up before. Now when I go up for an early access game, I won't buy it when it first comes out, even if it's early access and I really want to see this game work and I want to be part of that content development team. I'll start looking at that reviews where it says mixed, slightly mixed, somewhat mixed with a chance of hail, good, mostly positive, and I'll see what other people that have early access to it are saying, whether, hey, look, they're taking our suggestions and running with them, or, hey, look, these guys are awesome, they've already put my concept into the game, or, hey, look, there's an update every other week, these guys are meaningful. So you can still hedge your bets to do that calculated risk a little bit more easy with early access.
Well, in that case, if you really want to get in on a game that's got very positive reviews right now in early access, go check out I Am Bread. Yes, the game is called...
I refuse.
The game is called I Am Bread. It's the beautiful story of one slice of bread's epic and emotional journey as it embarks upon a quest to become toasted. As you delve deeper and deeper into the story of I Am Bread, you'll notice that things aren't quite what they seem.
I don't think I want to know.
It's being made by Bossa Studios, which has already put out games like Surgeon Simulator 2013 and Deep Dungeons of Doom. But yes, I Am Bread. So there you go. Well, good. I think we've had a definitely good meaty discussion, especially on the part of indie games. Do we have any final thoughts on this before we wrap up the episode?
I got nothing.
I see. Your silence is deafening. I get it. All right, we've beaten.
I got nothing. Sorry.
We've beaten the subject to death. So Wyatt, I'll give you a minute or two to do your plug for Sprites and Dice since you're not on here that often. So remind the internet what it is.
Sprites and Dice, we've actually done some huge changes recently that I'm really proud of. We kind of went into a dormant state for a while, but now we have like another 2 new writers. We are a very small gaming journalism site called www.spritesanddice.com. We're supposed to be a mixture of covering video games as well as miniature games, board games, anything we really want to cover. And while we definitely do reviews, because that's what people look for, we also want to do a lot of more editorials and more personal aspects as to why we like games or what we think the gaming industry is starting to do. Kind of what you do here, Brian. And one thing that I've been covering recently was I just covered how the new downloadable content and the studio kind of community gathering that Amplitude Studios is doing with the Endless Legend and Endless Space series is great. And I'm about to publish a new article about another Kickstarted game that's in early access right now that I saw at last PAX called Hand of Fate, and how when I first played it, it was terrible. Not terrible in the fact that it was a bad game, but I couldn't run it on my computer. It wasn't optimized enough. But then seeing it over time and seeing it be able to grow and change, and seeing in the updates they would reference to individual people saying, "Hey, look, we fixed this issue that you guys brought up, and we added this element," and how awesome it is to see. So I'll definitely be writing almost like a coinciding article with this discussion. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. So wait a minute, it's spritesanddice.com now? You got rid of you have your own domain name? You got rid of the
Yes, we did.
You got rid of the Blogspot monitor.
Now, yes, so that's what we've been wanting to do. We were nervous about, but now we've got writers. We're having more repetitious content, not just every so often, and John's been able to become a full-time webmaster. We're constantly redoing the website. We're hoping to grow into a slightly larger kind of setup, and I'm excited.
Excellent. So you're ahead of me, because I still want to actually get a website for downloadable content off the ground, except I don't know square one about making a website. So maybe that'll happen this year. We don't know. So that's going to do it for us. If you have any comments, questions, thoughts, whatever about this episode or any other episode of downloadable content, once again, you can get a hold of us at facebook.com/dlcontent, at Twitter at dlcontent, on Tumblr at dlcpodcast.tumblr.com, and of course you can also email us at dlcontent1@gmail.com. And of course, if you have any suggestions for episodes, we'd love to hear them. We've certainly done fan-suggested episodes in the past, and I could certainly get some ideas for later on in Season 5. So I think that about covers it. Oh yes, and of course, all episodes can be found on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher. So there you have it. So all it remains for me to do is to thank Ron and Wyatt for being on this episode. I'm Brian. Have a good one, everybody.